Good morning, my friends. I am your beloved, my beloved, our beloved Reverend Elisha Christopher. I do prefer the pronouns they and them, and my ancestors immigrated from this country on my father's side from Scotland and Ireland, on my mother's side from Austria and Holland. Well, good morning. Happy New Year. Is it a Happy New Year so far? We're 2 days in. How you doing? All right, good. We're here. I'm glad. Well, we are entering into a whole new journey this year. We have a brand new theme, and I'm really excited to dive into this year that I'm calling our Year of Inner and Outer Permaculture. Some of you who are here for the holiday party saw the presentation from the students from Cabrillo College, and they've given us a permaculture design for our property. And we are going to be exploring some of these principles and ideas over the next number of weeks and months. So let us begin today, as always, by taking a deep breath in and letting it go. And taking another deep breath and let go. Take another deep breath in and let go. I want to begin by reading to you from our global vision for Centers for Spiritual Living. And you do have this for those of you who are in the room in your pamphlet. And it's not this quote, Maggie. And so for those of you who are online, just listen as we read this. And so I want to just begin this as our launching point to understand why I chose this year's theme and then to dive in a little bit deeper to where we're going. So you can follow along if you're in the room or just listen if you're online. The global vision for the Centers for Spiritual Living. We see a world that works for everyone, where all life is honored as expressions of the divine, where people live according to spiritual truth, where humanity rediscovers personal creative power, where we live as one global family, where kinship with all life prospers, where unity and connection is emphasized, where forgiveness is the norm, where spiritual guidance is valued, where we are called to conscious social action, where people have enough food, homes, and a sense of belonging, where there is peace, harmony, and justice for all, where resources are valued, cared for, and shared, where communities are meaningfully involved in service to the world, and where there is a renewed emphasis on beauty, nature, creativity, art, and aesthetics. It's not a bad vision, you know. It's reasonable, and this statement, this global vision statement, is really it's a guiding light for me. This very particular statement it's north on my compass. And as we step into this community, as I step into this community further and further, I really want to invite all of us to really rally around this global vision. And then for each one of us to see where our particular piece of that fits, where our particular interests and areas of expertise fit into that global vision. And if that's our guiding vision, if that's our true north, does that then become the measure of our behavior and our choices and our purchases and our votes and all of the things that we do as we engage in the world? And, you know, New Thought has been really good. Science of Mind has been great for teaching us how to take the spiritual principles of the universe and enact them in our lives for our own personal creation. And yet I find that for myself and for many of us, and as I've been part of the Centers for Spiritual Living movement for over 15 years now, I often find that there's a little bit of a disconnect in our actual existence between, thanks Kaylee, that there's often a disconnect in our actual existence between our ability and our belief that says God is all there is and the choices we make and the life we want to live, and then the vision of what it is that we say we're wanting to live into. And, you know, you come into this place to be reminded of your oneness and to be reminded of spiritual principles, and then you go to work, or you interact with your family, or whatever the situation is. Does this mentality play into how you show up in all of the different arenas of your life. And I think the global vision is beautiful because it sort of lays out, here's a whole bunch of different areas that we want to see a thriving world. We want to see a world without homelessness. We want to see a world where forgiveness. We want to see a world that's full of art. It gives us a picture. And, many of you have heard me say over the last number of months that I think a global vision is really important, but we also need a local vision. We need a vision for our individual lives and for our community. And, the permaculture design that we were gifted, I think, is a great example of what's possible on a 1 square acre of land that could demonstrate how a world that works could look, right? And then if we're able, each of us are able to participate in something that transforms this community and brings about something that is thriving, that creates habitat and food and places for us to gather and invite others in, then it also gives us a template to say, maybe I could recreate that same level of change and beauty in my own life. What if we cultivate a vision that's so captivating for our collective that then each one of us remembers that we can then do a design for our own life of what our own thriving existence could look like? And as many of you know, I am a permaculture enthusiast, and you're going to hear this word a lot in the next year. And we're going to be referring to David Holmgren is one of the big names in permaculture, and he's come up with 12 basic principles that he says are the principles for living in this new way. And as some of you may know, the idea of permaculture comes from putting sort of 2 words together, permanent and culture. We want to build a permanent culture, a sustainable culture, a culture that can last for 7 generations. And that each one of us comes to this place to learn the principles and practices of science of mind and new thought, I think, so that we can learn how to develop a permaculture for our minds and build a mental atmosphere, a mental landscape that leads us to thriving, right? And so Ernest Holmes, who's our founder of Science of Mind, gives us this quote about what mindfulness is, which I think kind of all spirituality is really about mindfulness. And Ernest Holmes says that mindfulness is the practice of paying attention in the present moment, objectively observing our behavior, attitudes, and beliefs of ourselves and others. It has been called self-observation. The ability to impartially observe our own personality and make changes is a fundamental key to spiritual growth. To observe your personality and then make changes, right? And how many of us actually do this? When we go into our life, when we speak to this idea that the universe is a reflection, right? Everything is a reflection. Out there is a reflection of what's happening in here. We say, if you can see it, it's yours. So do you use this idea that Ernest Holmes is telling us about mindfulness to look at your life, to look at your experience, your personality, your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, and observe them, and then make the necessary changes based on those observations? Well, the first principle of permaculture, which we're going to be using as our theme for this month of January, is observe and interact. Observe and interact. Regular agriculture, regular landscaping, regular, colonized minds walk onto a landscape and say, how can I impose my will upon this? Permaculture is a philosophy that says you walk onto a landscape and perhaps you take a year to see where the water flows, to see where the shady places are, to see what weeds and plants are already growing that could inform you about what things would grow well in certain areas. And then based on that information, you start to interact with the land. I want to use this as a metaphor for each one of us to look at our lives, to look at our community, to look at the world, and use this idea of observe and interact as the basic number 1 spiritual principle that both permaculture, this practical application, is all about, but observe and interact is also, I'd say, the first principle of science of mind. One of the taglines for this philosophy is change your thinking, change your life. We could say observe your thinking, make some changes, change your life. right? Because as you've heard Reverend Grace say in her talks many times before, first, in order to change your thinking, you have to recognize that and what you're thinking. You have to recognize that the thoughts are happening. You have to recognize that you have triggers. You have to observe yourself. You know, I'm a big fan of Emerson. And Ralph Waldo Emerson kept hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of notebooks. And in all of his notebooks were his observations about his observations about his observations about life. And so he would say, you know, I saw someone today and I observed that they were doing this. Well, then I observed that it made me feel that. And then I observed that feeling that made me think about this. And then I observed that thinking about that, you know, and that in this deep self-analysis, he got down to some really deep truths, right? We have to sift through the layers of our experience. And so Bill Mollison is one of the founders of permaculture, and I want to read you another quote. Because he tells us that permaculture is a philosophy of working with rather than against nature, of protracted and thoughtful observation rather than protracted and thoughtless action, of looking at systems and people in all of their functions rather than asking only one yield of them, and of allowing systems to demonstrate their own evolutions. Right? And this applies to landscapes, it applies to communities, it applies to our individual lives. You know, Ernest Holmes is telling us that science of mind, that mindfulness, that spirituality is about observation and then making careful and necessary interactions to change based on what you see. Bill Mollison is telling us that permaculture is about looking at the world, observing what is there, observing the laws of nature, observing what is already possible, and then working with that. You know, our philosophy tells us that there are particular laws of the universe that we can work with. Permaculture tells us that there are certain laws of nature that we can learn to work with. If we learn to replicate nature, if we learn to replicate how the universe works in our own lives, we can bring about this global vision a lot easier than trying to force it to happen and impose our idea of how this could look on the world. You know, we talk a lot about this idea of decolonizing our minds in this community. And I think that permaculture gives us this really practical roadmap. You know, this first principle we're going to be talking about this month is observe and interact. Next month, the next principle, use and value diversity. Another principle, produce no waste. Another principle, design from patterns to details. Another principle, use edges and value the marginal. These ideas we're going to be exploring over the course of this year and looking at them both as how we can use these ideas to look at nature and look at the world and create thriving gardens, but also recognize that each one of us is working with the landscape of our own life, the landscape of our own thinking, that your mind is a landscape, that our community, that our culture, our society is a landscape, that the entire planet is a landscape. And so these principles can apply on a multitude of different levels. And I think that some of us need the sort of practical breakdown to engage this deep observation and interaction that's required to actually embrace the power and the magic that is available in our philosophy. Because I think when we start to clean up the cognitive dissonance between what we say we believe and what we do, that the distance between what we desire and what's possible gets closer and closer together. Right? It's when we're out of alignment, when our beliefs and our choices don't line up, that we're not really manifesting properly. And stuff shows up weird and uncomfortable and ugly and hard to deal with. It's because there's something broken in our thinking or in our actions. And so I love these permaculture principles because they're going to invite us to look at ourselves, to look at our communities, to look at how we behave in the world, how we think about the food we eat. You know, the universe, nature, is a thriving system that is full of possibility. You know that carrots come in orange, but they also come in purple and yellow and all sorts of strange, bendy, weird shapes? And yet the world we live in tells us that a carrot needs to be orange, of a particular size and shape. And if it doesn't look like that, we're not going to buy it, we're not going to eat it. We say we're people of possibility, but does that go all the way down to every little choice we make? And that quite literally, even the food on your plate could be programming your mind to what you think is possible, what you think is acceptable, what you think you deserve. And natural systems lead to thriving ecosystems. If you look at a forest, it doesn't require fertilizer. The soil isn't being depleted with every generation of crop yield. The forest regenerates itself and creates space where every member of the community can thrive. We want to build a community that produces no waste, that recognizes that every single person here can be part of a thriving system, and that the more we give, the more we receive, that the more we participate, the more there is to engage in. And so we're going to spend a year digesting, breaking down these principles, inviting us to look at them through a multitude of different levels. Looking at these ideas of how they apply to our physical bodies and to the world. We're going to be looking at these ideas and how they apply to the landscape of our mind and our choices. We're going to be looking at how these ideas apply to our culture, the stories we tell, the mythosphere that we live in, and then also what it means on a spiritual, global, and sort of interconnected level. And so I hope that you are ready to dive into this year of inner and outer permaculture with me, because I think it is time for us to lean a little bit harder into our global vision and really allow that to be our true north, the statement that leads us. And, you know, for the board of directors, for our board of trustees, you're going to get sick of this. For practitioners and ministers, the people who are working on the inner circles of this organization, we're going to be reading this a lot. When we have conversations, when we're looking to make choices, when we're looking to start programs, when I'm asking you about your feelings about things, I'm going to want to know, is it in alignment with this? Let this be what our vision, what we circle around with everything that we do here. And then let each one of us have this be our North Star as we go into our lives at home, as we go grocery shopping, as we vote, as we engage with our families. What does it look like to have a true north on our compass that we can continuously look to and check? Am I moving in the right direction? You know, Cheryl Schmidt shared a website with me a while back that's a how many Earths are you using calculator. And it's basically a little calculator that asks you a whole bunch of questions about your lifestyle, about what you eat, what kind of energy you use, how big your house is, what you drive, all the things. And it says, if everyone on the earth lived like you live, how many Earths would it require? I currently live a 2.7 Earth lifestyle. And I guarantee you I live a much more conservative life than most people. The average American, I think, lives something like a 12 Earth lifestyle. I want to invite us to recognize that if we want to actually live into our vision of a world that works for everyone, each one of us needs to get down to a one Earth lifestyle. And I believe that by pairing the principles of permaculture with the principles of science of mind, that there's actually a roadmap right in front of us that we can explore over this next year that I think that each one of us can get down to a one earth lifestyle, and that we can be a community that shows a template of what is possible to the community, to the world around us, and to the entire organization of Centers for Spiritual Living, of what a Center for Spiritual Living could be in the world. So join me as we move into 2022. Take a deep breath. And so I do want to invite my ministers and practitioners to stand and just hold space as we just breathe a little deeper into this moment. And if it's comfortable for you, close your eyes and take a deep breath in. And so as we breathe into this moment, let each of us remember that there is indeed one life, one infinite being that is living and breathing throughout the entirety of the universe, and it is this one who has been driving evolution for all of time, who has been unfolding throughout all of creation, who is living in every life, shining every star, spinning the planet, unfolding as the galaxies, growing the trees, dividing as our very selves. That this one supreme intelligence that I call God, that we recognize as the universe, that is our consciousness, it is the truth of who we are. And so today, let each one of us step into this new journey of awakening, a new way of being. Let us remember that we are the choosing place in the universe. That for 14 billion years, evolution has been unfolding by default. And now it's in our hands, because now it unfolds through choice. And so let us choose to be a people who live into a global vision. Let us be a people who want to allow our spiritual truth to unfold in our actual life. And let us raise the vibration of this place to be an example to our community of what is possible. And as we transform this place, let us transform ourselves. Let each one of us create a permaculture design for our lives that leads us to thriving. Let each one of us say yes to what is possible. And remember that we are here for something more, for something greater than we have experienced up until now. And so let us just be in gratitude for the opportunity to be in community together, to unfold into what is next, remembering that there is indeed a power for good in this universe that is so much greater than we are, and yet it is who we are. Let us be it on purpose. Let us be the change we wish to see. Let us be the place where possibility becomes actuality. Let us be the place of choice. And so it is. Thank you, my friends.